The morning she told me she wanted a divorce, I was making her coffee. Not because it was my job, not because she asked, because in 11 years of marriage, I had learned exactly how she liked it. 2 sugars, a splash of oat milk, heated to 160 degrees, poured in a white ceramic mug her mother gave her the year we got engaged. I did it without thinking. That's what 11 years does. It turns love into muscle memory. She walked into the kitchen, arms crossed, and looked at me the way you look at furniture you're about to donate. Not with hatred, with indifference. "I need to tell you something," she said. I set the mug down in front of her. She didn't touch it. "I want a divorce, Daniel. My father left me $8 million. I've spoken to an attorney. I don't want to drag this out. $8 million. And she'd already called a lawyer. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't knock the coffee over or slam a door or do any of the things she'd clearly brace herself for, because I could see it in her posture, that slight lean backward, the prepared stillness of someone waiting for an explosion. She wanted the explosion. It would have made this easier for her. It would have made me the villain in the story she was already writing. So, instead, I pulled out a chair, sat down across from her, and said, "Okay, then let's make it quick." Her eyes flickered, just once. Then she straightened, nodded, and walked out of the kitchen. She left the coffee untouched. That was the last morning I made it for her. Before I tell you what happened next, and I promise you what happened next will stay with you, I need you to understand something about the 11 years that came before that morning. I was not a wealthy man when we married. I was a structural engineer with a modest salary, a used pickup truck, and a 2-bedroom house I bought at 27 with money I'd saved since college. Elena was a pastry chef with a dream of owning her own bakery, and a student loan that made her flinch every time she checked her phone. We were not a power couple. We were 2 people who chose each other honestly, without strategy, without calculation, or so I believed. I sold my truck to cover the down payment on her commercial kitchen equipment. I worked overtime for 3 months straight to help her float the bakery through its first lean winter. When her father's health declined, I took unpaid leave to help her care for him. Because she couldn't do it alone, and because I loved her, and because I believed that's what marriage meant. Her father, Robert, was a quiet, observant man. He didn't speak often, but when he did, it counted. About 8 months before he died, he pulled me aside during a family dinner. Just the 2 of us on the back porch, him with a glass of bourbon, me with nothing. And he said something I've thought about every single day since. "Daniel, you're the only honest thing in my daughter's life. And I'm not sure she knows it yet, but I do. And I want you to know I've made provisions. Whatever happens, I haven't forgotten what you gave up for this family." I thought he was being sentimental, a sick man getting nostalgic. I was wrong. He was being precise. The divorce process moved fast because Elena wanted it fast, and because I didn't fight it. The house was in my name, purchased before the marriage, a fact she'd grown so accustomed to ignoring that it genuinely surprised her when I reminded her. I sold it within 3 weeks, gave her a fair cut of the shared assets, and moved into a small rented apartment across town. She took the settlement with a gracious efficiency of someone who'd already moved on. She'd sign a lease on a luxury penthouse before the ink was dry on our separation agreement. She'd hired a personal stylist. She put the bakery on the market. The bakery had built, that I had poured money and weekends and belief into, and was rebranding herself as some kind of lifestyle entrepreneur. She didn't ask where I was going. She didn't ask if I was okay. She smiled at the real estate agent when he handed me the sale documents and said with practiced lightness, "You'll land on your feet, I'm sure." I didn't respond. I just signed because I already knew what she didn't, and I had known it for 3 weeks. Let me explain. When Robert's estate attorney contacted me 6 days after the funeral, not Elena, me, I assumed it was a formality, some asset I'd co-signed on, some minor administrative matter. It was not a formality. Robert had constructed his will with the precision of a man who had spent 40 years watching people reveal themselves under financial pressure. The primary inheritance, $8 million, was real, but buried in the second addendum, drafted 18 months before his death, was a clause that Elena's attorney had apparently glossed over or missed entirely. Should my daughter separate from her spouse within 120 days of my passing, the full inheritance will be redirected to a list of charitable organizations specified in Appendix C. Elena filed for divorce 19 days after the funeral. The estate attorney had reached out to me as a courtesy because Robert had named me as a secondary executor, a fact Elena also didn't know. He wanted to ensure I understood the timeline. He wanted to make sure I wasn't blindsided. I thanked him. I hung up. I poured myself a drink and then I made the hardest decision of my life. I said nothing. Not because I wanted to punish her, or not only because of that, if I'm being honest, but because I understood something her father had understood long before I did. Some lessons cannot be delivered gently. Some people only see the truth when the comfortable version has been taken away from them completely. She had looked at our marriage and seen a liability. She had looked at $8 million and seen freedom. She had looked at me, 11 years of me, and seen something she no longer needed. I wanted her to feel, just once, what it was like to have something important suddenly gone. She called 26 days after our separation was finalized. I was in my apartment eating takeout, watching the kind of television that fills time when silence feels too heavy. My phone lit up with her name. I stared at it for 2 full rings before answering. Her voice was unrecognizable. Not the cool, composed woman who had informed me she was leaving. This was something broken, frantic, gasping. Daniel, the money. They've frozen everything. The accounts, the inheritance, all of it. My attorney is saying there was a clause that my father. Daniel, please, I don't understand. I know about the clause, I said. Silence. You knew. Your father told me he'd made provisions. I found out what that meant after the funeral. Another silence, longer, and then, very quietly, why didn't you warn me? I thought about the coffee I'd made her that last morning, about the truck I sold, about the overnight shifts and the unpaid leave and the 11 years of choosing her every single day without her ever once choosing me back when it finally counted. Because you didn't ask me, I said. You told me. I hung up. I wish I could tell you the story ended there, that I walked away clean, dignified, the wrong man who took the high road and never looked back. That would be a tidier ending. But the truth was messier, darker, and ultimately more just. Because Elena hadn't just miscalculated the clause. She'd been planning much further ahead than anyone realized. My private investigator, a quiet, thorough man I'd hired 4 months before the divorce, when the late calls and disappeared weekends first started adding up, brought me something else entirely. An account, offshore, opened under a variant of my name, with 3 deposits totaling over $600,000. Her fingerprints, my name, her plan. She'd been building a backup. If the clause somehow failed, if she somehow lost the inheritance through the divorce proceedings, she had arranged to frame me for financial misconduct, to walk in a court with evidence that I had stolen from the marital estate. The account was designed to look like I'd been skimming for years. It was sophisticated. It was calculated. It was, I realized, the work of someone who had never trusted the life we built together. Who'd been hedging quietly, methodically, for longer than I wanted to know. I took everything to my attorney on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday, a sealed envelope had been delivered to the board of Robert's company, where Elena had inherited a seat, containing the full documentation. Transaction logs, account records, correspondence between her and the man she'd been meeting on those spa weekends, a failed investment broker with an offshore setup and outstanding warrants in 2 states. By Thursday, she was escorted from the building. By Friday, her corporate accounts were frozen. The man she'd been protecting and funding fled the country when his name appeared in the filing. He was arrested in Portugal 3 months later for unrelated fraud charges. Karma, as it turns out, doesn't require an invitation. There was also the foundation. We had started it together the year after we married. A small charitable fund in Robert's name, dedicated to food security and medical access in underserved communities. It had been Elena's idea originally, and I had believed in it completely. I had believed in her completely. She had been using it as a laundromat. Donor funds redirected, contribution records altered, receipts for luxury goods buried inside operational expenses. When the board demanded an explanation, I stood in front of them and said the most painful words I've ever spoken in public. I'm sorry. I was deceived by someone I trusted completely. But I want you to know, every dollar that was taken will be returned. And this foundation will not be destroyed by one person's dishonesty. I'm in it. I spent the following year making it true. My son was 9 years old when all of this happened. He spent those months shuffling between my apartment and his grandmother's house, confused and quiet in the way children are when they sense the adults around them are barely holding together. One evening, about a year after everything had settled, he climbed onto the couch next to me while I was reading. Dad, he said, are you glad it happened? I set the book down. I looked at him, this small, serious person who had gotten my eyes and his mother's stubbornness, and I thought carefully before answering. No, I said, but I'm glad I survived it. He nodded slowly, the way kids do when they're absorbing something too large for words. Then he put his hand over mine and said, "Mom chose the money, but you chose me." I didn't trust myself to speak for a long moment. Every time, I finally said, every single time. I rebuilt. Not dramatically, not in any way that made headlines. Slowly, steadily, the foundation became real work, not a side project, but a purpose. We renamed it the Groundwork Trust. Within 18 months, we had partnered with 3 school districts, funded 2 women's financial recovery programs and helped 47 families avoid eviction. I did not do any of this for optics. I did it because when everything false had been stripped away, it was the one thing that remained that I was genuinely proud of. Elena moved to another city. Last I heard, she was trying to rebuild something from the ruins. I don't follow her life. I hope, distantly and without warmth, that she finds some version of peace. But I don't think about her coffee anymore. Here is what I want you to take from this. Not the legal drama, not the financial collapse, not the karmic precision of a father who saw his daughter clearly and loved her anyway. The real story is about what you choose when the choice costs you something. I chose honesty when I could have chosen strategy. I chose silence when I could have chosen revenge. I chose my son when I could have chosen bitterness. None of those choices were easy. All of them were right. Being underestimated is not the end of anything. It's the beginning of the only kind of victory that actually lasts. The kind where you look at who you've become on the other side and recognize yourself. I still live simply. I still drive a used truck. I still make my coffee without anyone to make it for. But I make it well and I drink it in peace. That, I've learned, is worth more than $8 million. If this story stayed with you, drop a comment.